If you are ever driving alone through an American winter highway where the snow falls so heavily that the world feels erased, remember one rule. If someone calls your name from the darkness, never answer, because this is how the horror in Alaska begins. Far beyond the last gas station, past broken road signs and frozen forests, there lies a forgotten stretch of highway near a dying town locals once called Frozen Hollow, a place where winter does not arrive but settles permanently, swallowing the sun for months and leaving behind endless nights of ice, silence, and fear. Mark Henson, a 29-year-old long-haul truck driver, had driven through storms before, but nothing prepared him for that night. His delivery route was supposed to be routine, medical supplies to a remote clinic, then back before morning. But the weather forecast changed without warning, or perhaps it never told the truth at all. Snow began falling like ash in the sky, thick, heavy, and relentless, blinding his headlights until the road ahead vanished into a white void. The wind slammed into the truck from all sides, rocking it gently at first, then violently, as if something unseen was trying to push him off the road. The radio crackled with static, voices cutting in and out, then went completely silent, leaving only a faint hiss before dying entirely. His GPS froze next, the screen locking on a blinking that refused to move no matter how far he drove. Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white inside his gloves, and slowed the truck as fear slowly crept into his chest. Then, without warning, the engine coughed, sputtered, and shut down. The truck rolled forward for a few seconds before coming to a dead stop in the middle of nowhere. Mark tried the ignition again. Nothing. He tried once more. Still nothing. Outside, the temperature display blinked minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, a level of cold capable of killing a man in minutes. He checked his phone. No signal. Battery draining rapidly in the extreme cold. Silence wrapped around the truck, thick and unnatural, broken only by the distant howl of the wind, a sound so hollow it felt as if the land itself was breathing. Mark sat there for several long moments, listening to his own heartbeat, trying to calm his thoughts, telling himself help would come, that this road was used, that someone would pass eventually. But deep down, something felt wrong. The storm did not sound natural. It sounded focused. He finally pulled on his jacket, wrapped a scarf around his face, and stepped outside, the cold biting instantly into his skin like knives, freezing his breath in the clouds of white vapor. That was when he noticed something unsettling. There were no animal sounds, no birds, no distant movement, just a complete and total stillness that pressed against his ears. The forest surrounding the road stood frozen, the tall pine trees motionless, as if watching. Then he heard it, a sound that did not belong to the storm. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching softly against the snow behind him. Mark froze where he stood, his heart slamming against his ribs as he turned his head slightly, afraid to look fully. "Hello!" he shouted, his voice sounding weak, swallowed almost instantly by the wind. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, he convinced himself it was exhaustion, the cold playing tricks on his mind. But then a voice drifted through the storm, low and trembling, carried gently by the freezing air. Mark. His blood ran cold. No one knew he was here. No one should have known his name. He spun around, scanning the darkness beyond the reach of his headlights, his breathing quick and shallow. "Who's there?" he yelled, but the storm answered instead, roaring louder. He backed toward the truck, every instinct screaming at him to get inside, to lock the doors, to hide. Then the voice came again, closer now, clearer, filled with something that sounded almost like sadness. "Mark, don't leave me here." Against his will, against every warning in his mind, he turned toward the road. Through the swirling snow, a shape slowly emerged, a human figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the highway. As the headlights illuminated her, Mark felt his legs weaken. It was a woman wearing a thin white dress, completely wrong for the weather, her long dark hair stiff with ice and frost. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, as if carved from frozen stone, and her eyes were entirely black, reflecting no light at all. She did not shiver. She did not blink. She simply stared at him. Mark took a step back, his boots slipping slightly on the ice, and that's when he realized something horrifying. There were no footprint behind her, no marks in the snow to show how she had arrived. The wind screamed around them, swirling violently. Yet she remained untouched, unmoving, as if the storm itself avoided her. Mark opened his mouth to speak, to ask who she was, to scream, to run, but no sound came out. The cold had settled deep into his lungs, turning every breath into pain. The woman tilted her head slowly at an unnatural angle, studying him like prey, and when she finally spoke again, her voice was calm, empty, and wrong. "Winter is very lonely," she whispered, and as she took a step forward, the snow beneath her feet did not move at all. Mark's legs finally obeyed him, stumbling backward until his shoulder hit the cold metal of the truck, the impact sending a dull vibration through his bones as the woman continued moving forward without sound, without resistance, without disturbing the snow beneath her feet, and with every step she took, the temperature seemed to drop even further, the air growing heavier, thicker, as if breathing itself was becoming optional. His mind screamed at him to get inside, to slam the door shut, to lock it and pray, but fear rooted him in place, his eyes unable to look away from her face, from those empty black eyes that reflected nothing, not the headlights, not the storm, not even him. "Who are you?" he finally forced out, his voice cracked and weak, barely audible over the wind, and for a moment she stopped, tilting her head again, the movement sharp and unnatural, like something imitating a human gesture, without fully understanding it. "I was cold once," she replied softly, and her voice did not echo, did not fade, but seemed to come from everywhere at once, slipping into his ears, into his chest, into his thoughts. Mark felt a sudden pressure in his skull, memories surfacing uninvited, standing alone as a child in winter, the feeling of being forgotten, the fear of not being found, and he realized with horror that the longer he listened, the more she pulled something out of him, something warm and alive. He tried to turn away, fumbling for the truck door handle, his gloves slipping against the frozen metal, and when he finally wrenched the door open and fell inside, he slammed it shut and locked it, his chest heaving as he scrambled into the driver's seat. The woman did not rush him. She did not react at all. She simply stood there, inches from the hood of the truck, watching, waiting. Mark jammed the key into the ignition again, praying the engine would respond, but it only clicked weakly, completely dead. Outside, the storm intensified, snow hammering against the windshield so violently that the woman's shape blurred and distorted. Yet somehow her eyes remained clear, fixed directly on him. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pressed her palm against the glass. Frost spread instantly from where she touched, spiderwebbing across the windshield, crawling inward, sealing him inside a cage of ice. Mark screamed, pounding the steering wheel, his breath fogging the air as the temperature inside the truck dropped rapidly, his fingers going numb even through his gloves. "Please," he whispered, not even sure who he was begging anymore. And that was when her lips moved again. "You heard me," she said. "That means winter chose you." The word settled into him like a verdict, heavy and final. The radio suddenly crackled back to life, static hissing loudly, and through it came faint voices, distorted, overlapping, whispering names, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once, and Mark realized with sickening certainty that these were not broadcasts, but echoes. The voices grew clearer, repeating the same phrase again and again, "Don't let the cold take you," until one voice cut to the rest, familiar and impossible. It was his own. Panic surged as the windshield cracked loudly, thin fractures racing outward from the frozen handprint. Outside, the woman stepped back, and for the first time, she smiled. It was not a human smile. It was too wide, too knowing. "Come outside," she said gently. "It hurts less if you stop fighting." Mark shook his head violently, tears freezing on his cheeks as he crawled into the back of the cab, wrapping himself in blankets, trying to preserve what little warmth he had left. He remembered safety videos, stories of hypothermia victims becoming calm, even euphoric before dying, and he understood now that the real danger was not the cold, but the surrender. The storm began to quiet, unnaturally so, the wind dying down until there was nothing but silence again. The woman vanished from sight, and for a brief, dangerous moment, Mark felt relief. Then he heard footsteps on the roof of the truck. Slow, careful, circling, Each step sent vibrations to the metal above him, dusting snow down onto his face, and with every step, the whispers returned closer now inside his head. Images flooded his mind. People walking into blizzards willingly, removing their coats, smiling as the cold embraced them, disappearing into white nothingness. He realized these were memories not his own, memories of those who came before him, those who answered when winter called. "You can rest," the woman's voice murmured, now directly behind his ear despite no one being there. "We all rest eventually." Mark pressed his hands over his ears, screaming, fighting the overwhelming urge to open the door, to step outside, to end the fear, and that was when something deep inside him snapped. He stood up, driven by desperation rather than courage. The red flare burned violently in Mark's shaking hand, its heat almost unbearable against his frozen fingers. It was the first real warmth he had felt in hours, and for a brief moment he believed it might save him, because the whispers recoiled, the pressure in his head loosened, and the truck seemed to breathe again as if relieved. Outside, the storm pulled back unnaturally, the wind dying into a low moan, and through the cracked windshield Mark saw the woman standing farther away now, her white dress rippling slowly as if underwater, her black eyes narrowing with something that resembled irritation. "Fire does not belong here," she said, her voice echoing strangely, stretched and distorted, as if winter itself were speaking through her. Mark clutched the flare tighter, crawling forward toward the driver's seat, forcing himself to focus, to think logically, reminding himself that rescue trucks use this road, that flares were visible for miles in darkness like this. He pushed the driver's door open and tossed the flare onto the snow, where it hissed angrily, painting the road in crimson light. For the first time, the woman reacted violently, stepping back as the snow around the flare melted instantly, revealing dark asphalt beneath, and Mark realized with a surge of desperate hope that she was bound to the cold, that warmth weakened her. He ran. Every step felt like agony as the freezing air tore into his lungs, but he ran toward the flare, toward the only light in the endless white, ignoring the screams that erupted behind him. Screams layered with dozens of voices crying out in fear, rage, and sorrow. The ground trembled as the snow began to move, rising in twisting shapes, forming silhouettes of people, men, women, even children. Faces frozen in silent screams, their bodies half-formed from ice and shadow. Mark understood then that these were the lost ones, those who answered winter's call, bound forever to the road, forced to wander until someone new replaced them. The woman raised her arms, and the temperature plummeted so suddenly that Mark felt his muscles seize, his legs buckling as ice crawled up from the ground, gripping his boots, pulling him down. He screamed as frost climbed his body, his thoughts slowing, his vision blurring. And in that moment, winter offered him peace, whispering promises of rest, of warmth without pain, of never being afraid again. He thought of home, of sunlight, of simple things like hot coffee and laughter, and he realized that winter didn't steal people by force. It waited for them to give up. With a final surge of will, Mark grabbed the burning flare and slammed it against the ice, encasing his legs, shattering it with a loud crack. He stood, stumbling backward, holding the flare between himself and the woman like a weapon. She shrieked, her form distorting, cracking like frozen glass, and for the first time her human mask slipped. Beneath it was something ancient, something vast and hollow, a presence that felt older than roads, older than towns, older than names, born from endless cold and human despair. "You cannot leave," she hissed, her voice no longer calm but fractured and furious. Winter remembers everyone. Mark backed toward the truck, toward the melting patch of road, when headlights suddenly appeared in the distance, faint but real, cutting through the darkness like a miracle. The woman turned sharply toward the lights, her expression twisting into rage, and she dissolved into a swirling cloud of snow that rushed toward the forest, carrying the screaming silhouettes with her. The road fell silent. Moments later, a rescue truck skidded to a stop beside Mark, its driver shouting as he pulled him inside, wrapping him in blankets, the warmth almost painful. As they drove away, Mark looked back to the rear window and saw the snow settling, erasing all signs of what had happened, as if the road itself wanted to forget. He survived, but survival came with a price. Months later, safe in a warm city far from Alaska, Mark still wakes in the middle of the night, his breath fogging the air even in heated rooms. Sometimes, when winter winds howl outside, he hears his name whispered softly, carried by the cold, and he knows she is still out there, waiting on frozen roads, patient as ever, because winter never stops calling, and one day, when the world grows quiet and cold enough, it always expects an answer